have to go to just get a story actually published. I mean, I've worked in newsrooms before, some of the biggest newsrooms in the world. It can be really hard, and they are very timid when it comes to the facts. And sometimes you just need to be able to say the facts. And you know, the audiences, they'll figure out if you're for them or they're not. But last time I checked, there are millions, what is it, 200 million people on YouTube? They'll find you.
It's the largest TV network. It's number one TV network.
I'd rather be there than on TV.
To piggyback on what Ben and Tara said about making a choice about authenticity, feeding the audience what they want, et cetera, I had kind of a tough moment with a part of my audience in the lead up to the last election where I think it must have been September or something like that, where I looked at the polling and I said, listen, we can kind of feel whatever we want about the way this is going, but the polling is worse for Kamala Harris in the 7 key swing states than it was for Biden in 2020. It's worse than it was for Hillary in 2016. I'm just doing, it's not even arithmetic, it's just I'm looking at numbers and telling you what they are. And a very loud, but I think probably small slice of my audience said that we need positivity, that this is not what the moment calls for. And it was a really interesting moment because I could have just gone back to, guys, this looks great, get out there. But it just wasn't what it was. And depending on where you are in your career and kind of like where your show is in terms of maturity, it could be very tempting to kind of go back to what's the easiest thing for your audience.
Because everything is so immediate. If you're doing a YouTube show, I do a live show. When I started, no one wanted video. And it hasn't even been 2 years. That I started about a little over a year and a half ago, and I was pitching my show around, and no one wanted video. And then now everyone wants video. Now people are open to live. People are doing lives. And before it was like, taped content. It monetizes better, and you can, edit it, and it looks better. Now people are open to live. So it's everything is evolving. So I just think that you have to adapt. And he's right. During the election, I would go out because I wanted to hear what people were saying. And I didn't get to do that when I was sitting on a big, shiny anchor desk unless they, teleported you into a certain place. And so I went out to the swing states, battleground states, and just talked to people. And then I started getting calls from Fox News and Newsmax and, oh my gosh, you're getting a lot of Trump out there. You must be really sad. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's a lot of Trump. People are saying they're voting for Trump in places and demographics that you didn't think would be saying that. And I got the same thing. Don, are you curating that? We don't want to hear that. And I say, I'm sorry. I've got to give you the facts. So you can be pressured into having a bias towards just feeding people what they want, whether that's left or right, and you have to fight against that.
In the short term, it's a hit, but in the long term, it's actually an asset.
A recipe for
because in the short term, the easy incentive is to go for the sugar high of giving the audience precisely what they want, but you actually lose your authenticity. You lose what you are when you do that.
Because after the election, people say, Don, you saw it, you called it, and they respect you for that, and they come back because then they realize you're actually telling them the truth.
Yeah, let me ask you this, David, and then I can get thoughts from all of you and you, Ben, specifically. One of the other things that we see in the US as a market is sort of the polarized nature of how people identify with some of the creators. So if you were to draw down a list between how people identified politically, they would name a wholly different list of 15 personalities if they were, right-leaning versus when they were left-leaning. Do you think that's reflecting an industry dynamic, or do you think that's how the ecosystem has developed online?
Well, I think it's both. I think from the creator perspective, you're starting with what are your values, and hopefully at least, if it's not contrived, what is authentically you, and then that's going to put you somewhere on the political spectrum. I think without a doubt, the way that algorithms engage directly with what triggers the most emotional response is a direct driver of the hyperpolarized nature. And, I'm guilty of it to a degree because I'm in this space. I also try to be honest with my audience about when it comes to things like gas prices and whether a president controls them. I'm very honest that this is overly politicized. It becomes a political football. And the truth is presidents can do a couple of things related to gas prices, and it's mostly not about that. And so I try to balance the fact that I do have a perspective, I do have an opinion from a moral standpoint about what I think is best, but at the same time, I'm trying to be upfront about the fact that there are things that are completely political, there are things that are outside of that, and hopefully the audience appreciates that over the long term.
Yeah.
The algorithms are destroying America. This is my informed view.
Sounds like it should go.
Yeah, there we go. Don, look at us come together. As soon as the reason I say this is because the TikTok and X algorithms in particular program for virality.
Yes.
And so they are programming for what is the strongest response, the
And it
strongest
can be
emotional response.
manipulated.
Absolutely can be manipulated by outside actors. You've actually seen quite a bit of this on both TikTok as well as X. But people who are then in the real world use that as a substitute for polling. For example, so you see politicians, and if they get a lot of retweets, they think what they're saying is popular, and then they do more of it. And so you'll see it bleed over into the real world. Trends that you would never get if you just walked around and talked to normal humans suddenly start popping up when you talk around with normal humans because they've been watching it online and it's been really, really pushed. And so, when people say, how do we get back to normal? My first recommendation is to do something that actually is the opposite of what our industry should be saying, which is get offline. Like, actually turn off your phone and go to a place with actual human beings and have conversations with those people. And, this is where I make my non-religious pitch. Everybody needs a form of Sabbath. You should get off your phone on Friday night. You should get back on your phone on Saturday night and just be completely disconnected from everything that's going on and be in a place where everybody who is, bonding over values and over shared things. That the more online we are, the more polarized we are. And I think that's been the opposite of the way that we viewed politics for decades in the country. The more informed you are, the better the electorate's going to be. And it turns out that because our informational ecosystem is so polluted and because it is actually programming to the id inside all of us, what that means is that probably the more time you're spending on X or the more time you're spending on TikTok, maybe the less informed you are, and also the more polarized you are, and the more out of touch with reality you are.
That's true. People think that they live on. I have a producer who lives on Twitter, and every time I ask him for something, he goes to Twitter, and I said, "Do you ever do research other than Twitter?"
Like touch some grass.
Yeah, touch some grass. But I do. It's interesting that Ben, you say that because I do every single day. I tell people because I go live at 10 and 5, and I tell them between that they can be informed without being inundated. They can read. And until then, I tell them, until I see you at 5 o'clock, turn the TV off. And
Only watch you at 10.
But I mean, turn the TV off or turn your and read and pick your moments. But I rarely do content. Every once in a while, I'll do weekend content because I think it's important to give people a break. And I do think that people should be in community with each other, and that's something that we should all be pushing. It doesn't, you don't make that much more revenue or become that much more successful by constantly pushing, even on the weekends, content.
Yeah,
I think you give people a break and make them want you,
And the two big platforms in the US are X and YouTube. That's kind of the spaces where people are driven to the
Although
most.
TikTok's enormous.
And TikTok's enormous, but it's probably got a bit more. It's not sort of hardcore news, if you will. It's people looking at lifestyle, culture, other things as well. And within X and YouTube, there is sort of a primary preponderance, if you will, of right-wing identified voices. Is there a reason you think for that? Do you think they've sort of moved ahead of the curve and there's more faces emerging from the left? What do you put that down?
I think that you see this quite frequently in terms of new technologies, that the right is the first to adapt because they feel shut out of traditional spaces. So, for example, the right was very shut out of TV spaces. Cable emerges, Fox News emerges because the right's like, okay, we need some place to go. And then after cable becomes more balanced, MSNBC comes up and CNN. And once you have all those outlets, then the right is like, okay, well, maybe we'll have to try talk radio. Talk radio is now going to be our new things in the 90s, the early 90s, you get that. So the timeline's off here, but that's basically the idea. When the right feels squeezed in a particular legacy space, they're the first to adapt to a new space. And so for me, my op-eds weren't going to be appearing in the New York Times. And so the idea of start your own online outlet is a lot more attractive than somebody who is going to have access to the New York Times. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Tara's former employer, Politico, invited me to write a newsletter for Politico, and there was basically a riot in the newsroom because how dare I write the holy and sanctified Politico morning newsletter. And so the right is the first to adapt, and then what happens is that people realize there's a market there, and they move into that market, and then a new market emerges. So I think there's definitely something to that for sure.
I think that's true, but the left has also been very hesitant to really fund a lot of these operations at a bigger level. And that, I think, has held back also the independent left spaces, where it's mostly people like me who are just building slowly over time, and there really hasn't been any large influx, or especially with younger people as they get into the age where you might think about starting to produce content. It's been missing, and a lot of my colleagues have said we all could have gotten going far more quickly on some of these platforms if someone had recognized the potential more quickly, had come in more rapidly to fill the gap that was then subsequently created as the right came in. There just really hasn't been that funding.
It's a short side on the left, or even center. If you're on the right, what is it? Red Seed Ventures or something like a Red Seed?
You're talking about the company that's associated with Fox
Red Seed
News
Ventures, and you have pouring money into conservative spaces, and you don't see that on the left or even center left or even
They're
center
starting
right.
to.
But
they
I think
have
that,
these like packs now. What is it called? That all of these creators are part of. Chorus. They're all getting supported through these
but
packs.
not nearly to the.
No, they're behind, but they didn't need it because they could just go to cable news and get interviews over and over again.
This is really the key, is that a lot of people who would be funders for these sorts of enterprises are like, well, why do I need to fund that? We already own CNN or MSNBC.
That's true. I think they were behind the curve in realizing that the power of that was diminished.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Tara, one question to you before we move from sort of context setting to challenges, which I'm sure there are many of. What also sort of comes through in a lot of our research, and this isn't unique just to the US as a market, is that if you were to map out the top few creators, most often it would be men.
Yes.